The Dalai Lama's recent visit to this country has spurred more discussion about what Canada's relationship should be with Communist China, while also highlighting yet again the intricate balancing act played out in Ottawa between religion and politics. Here's the final segment of Randall Mark's interview with NDP leader Jack Layton.
With a recent visit with the Dalai Lama,
yes.
Both to the United States and to Canada, there seems to be an openness to be able to dialogue about faiths across the board. What do you see? I mean, here's a person who's very religious, deeply respected, and yet a political figure at the same time in Tibet and in his engagement with China. How do you see the idea of politics and religion working in tension and in tandem?
Well, of course, I think it's very important that, that religion per se and the state be separate, because that way you can ensure that all of the religions can function in the context of a democratic society. But the values that emanate from faith communities about the kind of community we want to build together, I think there's enormous commonality there, and we need to be exploring how those values can be translated into public policy, making sure that if a person's sick they can get the care they need, no matter whether they're rich or poor, and making sure that, as we talked about housing, making sure the environment is proper, making sure people aren't exploited by unscrupulous companies wherever they might be, and that there's fairness for workers.
Do you ever see a point where a certain religious value might come in contact or in contrast with the ideas that, let's say, of the Constitution or the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, where the religion has to be second place and be subservient to the Charter?
Oh, well, I think the Charter provides for freedom of religion, but the Charter is the governing, and the Constitution is the governing legislation of our civil society. And I think we want to be sure that it stays that way, because that is really the only way that all faiths can be guaranteed freedom within the context of our democracy.
China, we brought up the Dalai Lama. The issue of China, the Olympics is approaching, and it's on many people's minds, the issue of human rights violation in China, and yet we have a trade relationship, and there's a complexity to that relationship. What's the position of the NDP on how Canada should be engaging with China?
Well, the first thing I always say, and some of the Chinese note this, we've got to clean up our own act here in Canada. When we think about the way First Nations are living in many communities today, the United Nations has drawn attention to this. We've got to make sure that we're honoring a concept of human rights here in Canada before we throw stones. But at the same time, I do think that, and I've met with the Dalai Lama, and we have spoken out on many issues as a party concerning human rights issues, and the NDP believes that Canada should be a voice. We need to speak out, and we need to work with the government of China as a mature government, a very important government in the world today, but underline the importance of fundamental human rights being respected. Think of labor rights, people working in coal mines dying at a ferocious rate in China right now. We want to see the international labor standards that have been accepted by the world, and the freedom to organize unions so that there can be health and safety provisions and negotiations. These kinds of things are very important.
One of the things I've always been fascinated with is the fact that you ride your bike a lot. You're always riding your bike, and both you and your wife. And that brings up an interesting point, not only just the environmental passion that you have, but what is it like to be married and to both be members of Parliament? This is a 7-day-a-week job. It's very intense, a lot of traveling. What is it like to engage at that kind of level and yet be married at the same time?
Well, I mean, I'm very lucky. I often think, you know, it's probably the same sort of experience as a farm family has, you know, where you're working on a common project and you each have your divisions of responsibility, but you're able to have that sharing of what it is you do together. And Olivia, of course, she's a wonderful woman and a really terrific political leader in her community, and now is our immigration critic, working with communities right across the country. And
do you ever disagree? Do you ever come home and say, I think you handled this wrong? Do you ever have that?
You know, I don't know why. Maybe it's because she's always out in front of me on the issues, but we've been very blessed that way. We really don't have those kind of disagreements. We're maybe just too excited about the opportunity we've been given to try to build the kind of world.
She's always right. That's probably...
Well, maybe that's my wisdom, is just to understand that she is. Right. I don't know, but but I live a very joyful life with Olivia and her mom, who lives with us, and it's to have 10,000 years of Chinese woman's wisdom in the house times two.
That is quite something.
you know, it gives me a bit of an edge.
I guess I'm very curious about how you have explored faith issues yourself. What kind of faith tradition do you come from yourself, and how does that get lived out by you?
Well, we come from a United Church background. Olivia was Baptist, Chinese Baptist Church. My great-great-uncle was a moderator of the United Church. I grew up very active in the church youth clubs and so on and so forth. And my parents ran the Sunday school in our little town. So, you know, it was always a big part of my life. We used to challenge it, though, sometimes. We would challenge some of what the church was doing. I remember we had a resolution about the church seemed to be spending more time on discussing property issues and whether it should sever off a piece of property to make some money, and not enough on some of the issues in the community, you know. So but that debate was encouraged in our little church, and I think I learned a lot about how you can raise issues and discuss issues and have them be founded on some values. And I think that that's very important, and that's where I think that you know, we're really at odds with the current government of Mr. Harper. I think that the approach, the vision that he's putting forward for the country with the support, even if it's just by sitting down, of Mr. Dion and the Liberals, it's taking us in the wrong direction.
Mr. Layton, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been a really great conversation.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Righto.
Good night.
More of The Standard in a moment.